The country's screen industry is lobbying to protect local content's place on Australian TV.
A group of senior industry representatives, including actors, directors and producers, is in Canberra at the moment to push their case. One of them is Penny Chapman, a TV producer who's been responsible for a string of Australian productions, including The Slap and The Straits, and she joins us now from Canberra. Penny Chapman, great to see you this morning. Tell us exactly what you're seeking from the federal government.
Michael, we're seeking that the Australian content regulations that apply to free-to-air prime channels and also to pay TV also apply to the digital channels that each of the commercial networks has in Australia. So each of the commercial networks has 2 digital channels. They don't have an obligation at the moment to run Australian content. In particular, they don't have an obligation to run drama and documentaries and kids, which are a really important part of Australian content. And we're asking that the government regulate to have them need to put drama and documentaries, but particularly drama, to air.
Right, this is a concern because, as we all know, those digital multi-channels owned by the commercial networks have become increasingly popular.
They are. They're very popular. And, of course, we appreciate that for the commercial networks, because there is now so much, there's a plethora of platforms, we appreciate that for them finding content from overseas is always going to be much, much cheaper than finding content from Australia. Australia actually is an incredibly efficient and effective production sector. We'd make a drama of the same quality of an American program for a quarter of the cost. But for the Australian broadcasters, who are our primary market, it costs them a lot more than it does to buy American content, say, because for the American market we are a secondary market. So it doesn't make a great deal of financial sense for the broadcasters to buy Australian-made programs, but of course, by virtue of the fact that they have licences and therefore a social responsibility to Australian audiences, it makes a hell of a lot of sense to continue the regulation. And we appreciate that in this day and age of anti-regulation, there's an inclination to step back from it. But in Australia, it's incredibly important, both for our audiences who love Australian content. Last week, the highest rating shows, of the 20 highest rating shows, 19 were Australian.
Now, the commercial channels have pushed back, saying they might agree with this in principle, but to impose these extra content quotas on them would place them in an intolerable financial situation. We know certainly Channel 9 and 10 have their fair share of financial troubles. I suppose the argument to be put to you, Penny Chapman, is that you need the networks in place to broadcast these Australian dramas, and if they're put under this financial pressure, which they say they would be put under, you may not have them in place to put that drama out there.
It's actually not that much financial pressure. What we're seeking is 40 to 50 hours new drama, original first-run drama a year across each of the network's 2 digital channels, which is less than an hour a week. That's not a great deal of money. It's $12 to $15 million each in the scheme of things. We think we're actually a bit perplexed that this has become a major issue, because in the scheme of things it isn't that much money. They are already reaching their quota, or the proposed quota under the Convergence Review recommendations on documentaries. So it's not that big a deal. What we're saying is that we appreciate that the commercial networks are experiencing difficulties because of their debt deals, their financing deals. We seek that the government does not subscribe to the view that Australian content has to pay for that.
And finally, Penny Chapman, if you don't get what you want in terms of these quotas, how much pressure will that put on the screen industry, the local productions here?
Well, the screen industry is always a very delicate thing. It's also full of some of the most creative people in the industry, in the world. The other thing to say to you is that Australia is now being looked at by the international market in ways that it's never been looked at before. Companies like my own, like Screen Time, now have major investments from international companies who are looking at Australian product and saying, nobody makes stories like you guys do, we want them, but we can only make them if our primary market, the Australian broadcasters, are going to buy our material. There's also a raft of fantastic young film and television makers out there who've got low budget drama productions raring to go, who are going to be doing terrific stuff, should be picked up.
Okay, Penny Chapman in Canberra, thank you very much for joining us this morning.